Alrighty, guys, welcome back to the fourth video in our series on leading for transformation. And this is going to explore the third of the 5 essentials. And it is called Explore Scope. Very exciting, very exciting. I know, Explore Scope. This is really a kind of just a change management principle, but it very much applies in the topic of leading for transformation. And I'll start out by telling a story, and then I'll give you a really practical exercise that you can go through as you are taking your journey. So just to reset again, we have already explored the vital importance of having your own soul in a healthy place. Hopefully you're taking great action on that. And then secondly, hopefully you've got secured prayer cover over your work and over your life. And if you haven't done that yet, now come on, stop this video and go do that. But I'm going to count on the fact that I'll take your word that you have done this and that you're ready to move on to the third essential, which is explore scope. So here's the story. There was a time a number of years ago where I was leading in a very large ministry context that had a team of people who were leading a prayer ministry. And I loved these folks. They were great, super wise. And we had a lot of important options for inserting the ministry of prayer into the context of the larger organization. So it was a really exciting time to develop new ideas and experiment, pilot a few things, all that good stuff. And I was meeting with the team for a planning session. We were in the midst of our ministry efforts, and we had a regular meeting on the books. So I was late, which occasionally happens. I was running late to this meeting, and so they went ahead and got started without me. And I was really looking forward to coming into the meeting late and finding out what progress had been made, what kinds of ideas they had been surfacing and exploring, and all that good stuff. And I came in and got a little bit of a rude awakening. I was not that excited about it, and it took me a while, honestly, to figure out why I was frustrated and what I wish had been going on instead. So let me tell you what I walked into. I walked into the prayer ministry folks, again, people I love, gifted, called, beautiful, beautiful souls. And they were spending a very long amount of time mapping out an entire teaching series for the entire church on prayer, because in their opinion, we hadn't been teaching on prayer enough, and that was a very big miss in the organization, and things would really change and improve in the prayerfulness of the organization, which was, of course, our goal, if only there would be a teaching series. And like they had it literally down to like this topic and this topic and this topic. And it took me a while to kind of redirect the conversation into anything that we could actually action against. And yet I didn't disagree with them that a teaching series on prayer would be amazing, and it would contribute to great lift to this topic. But guys, here's the problem. It was not ours to decide. That was not within our scope of what we had the ability to lead towards. And here's what I have found many years on. That happened way long time ago. We redirected in the meeting and started focusing on things we could actually do something about. But here's another thing that was difficult in that meeting. By the time I arrived, I'm exaggerating, so bear with me here a little bit, but they had just about worked themselves into a froth about how terrible our body of teaching had been. This had not been addressed. That this was a glaring error. That we were danger. I don't know. I'm making things up, but it just they were not happy campers by the time I arrived, even though they were in the middle of planning a thing they could do absolutely nothing about. And so that was hard for me as the team leader to say, not only did we waste time trying to imagine things that we had no ability to move against, but we had also sort of worked ourselves up into an attitude of distrust, of disrespect, of dishonor, feeling very entitled to our opinions, which may have been valid, But the emotional edge that came with those opinions took me a long time to get everybody sort of ratcheted back down to emotional steadiness, and then redirected, focused onto, well, what is in our yard, to use Henry Cloud's boundary language, what is in our yard, responsibility, scope, to actually drive? What is ours to do? And so from a stewardship and a leadership standpoint, not only had we sort of wasted energy thinking about a thing that wasn't ours, gotten ourselves into an emotional frustration point because of things that were not ours, we also had missed 45 minutes of actual work toward the things that we could steward, the things we could take action on. And so I say that as a way of introduction, just to say in the many years working around the themes of leading for spiritual formation, I've found that this can be a bit of a common practice where we think we're being productive, sitting in a room and talking about all the things that need to change that are really none of our, I'm not going to say they're none of our business. They are our concern, but they are not our ability to influence. And I think there's a couple biblical concepts that flow into this wisdom here. And probably the first among them is that we're called to be faithful with what we have been given. And that over time, as we are faithful with little, God will arrange the world, not because we're forcing it. God will arrange the world so that we're invited to be faithful with much. And that is an expression of our trust, our confidence in the kingdom, not to try to go manage our way into greater impact and influence. That's the Lord's to give. We keep our own oxygen mask on. We keep our own scuba gear on. We keep breathing in the atmosphere of the kingdom. And from that place, we're very carefully attuned to what exactly have we been invited to give leadership to, and what haven't we? And make peace with that, not be angry, not be indignant, not waste our energies on things that are not ours to do. Now, we can be, and maybe you need to be, from whatever seat in the bus you have, a loyal critic. Like, hey, this would be a symptom of organizational unhealth. But we steward that opinion very carefully. We do not run around bludgeoning people with our opinions. And it's vital that we move out in the very nature and way of Jesus. Not that he didn't have a couple strong moments of tossing tables and calling names, but that's the Godhead. That's Jesus. And most of us in our anger are not as capable of not sinning. So here's the exercise I want you to go through. This comes from one of Stephen Covey's books, actually, and I think it was The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And he has you draw two concentric circles, a smaller one and a larger one. So, like, pull out a sheet of paper and do that right now. And I want you to draw first the larger circle and call it my circle of concern. Circle of concern. I don't have a blank sheet of paper, otherwise I could do it here. But you just draw it out. What is a circle of concern? Just write those words. And then within it, write circle of influence. And those are the words that he used in describing it. You could use, I suppose, whatever word you want. But here's the differentiation I want you to begin to name and then write what belongs in which circle. The circle of concern is things that you care about. Maybe that you observe. Maybe there's a cultural practice in your organization that is not healthy. Maybe there is an imbalance in the teaching and we haven't really equipped people to understand prayer or other basic core spiritual practices. Maybe there's some, I don't know what they are. Maybe there's some decision-making patterns that are not healthy. Whatever they are, let's call those your areas of concern. And then the circle of influence, what you want to write in there is what have you actually been given dominion over? And that's a very biblical concept. God is all about, like, what is the dominion that you have, your sort of mini kingdom under God's kingdom? Where is it that as you say, so it will be? And that's authority in the right and good sense. That is not a bad thing. We are all holders of dominion under the dominion of God, under the kingship, the lordship of God. And he says, you get to steward this one little place. This is important for you. So, what is in your circle of influence that you can directly control, and what is in your circle of concern? Over time, you may find that that circle of influence really does begin to grow. But that is not your concern. That is not your worry. The Lord is really good at deciding who gets to do what, and he can be trusted. But what I want you to see is that make sure that the things that you're so concerned about don't rob you from actually taking action on what you can directly influence. I know for me, in one of the roles that I left, one of the biggest regrets I've had was that I did not have the organizational authority that I thought was needed to make some of the differences that I wanted to make, that I thought needed to be made. And as a result, I was in some ways hyper-focused on the fact that I didn't have the title or the organizational authority to do a thing. And years later, I felt the sort of gentle nudging of the Spirit to recognize, Mindy, you didn't have that, but you did have other ways of expressing influence that could have been very, very helpful in that season. And I mean, I don't have shame or anything about it, but I do have regret. I do wish that the thought that, what if I had just sent simple emails to the team members that knew me, loved me, and reminded them of, I don't know, a scripture or a quote from Henry Nouwen or Dallas Willard or any of the favorite authors that I have. And I think people would have been encouraged by that. How can you steward your influence to encourage people? How can you steward your influence to be there for a team member who's having a rough time? And recognize that actually may be a really significant way that you are leading for transformation without the authority. It's not that you get to say it's going to be a thing and make it so, but you can actually serve into the lives of those who do have that responsibility without being controlling or weird, just serving. So that's like a small example from my own life of where I didn't have the authority that I thought I needed to make the kinds of changes that I thought were needed. But I understewarded the influence I actually did have. And so I would have you consider, what influence do you really have? And recognize that it might take a different shape than a straight up title or authority, but that influence can still and should still be stewarded. That's a big thing. And then the things that are in your circle of concern, it may well be that God has given you eyes to see things that do need to change, things that could well improve. And while you don't have the ability to make it so and change those things directly through your own direct influence, the circle of concern can absolutely become your areas of prayer. Sometimes we get so wrapped around the axle of things that we don't think should be a certain way that we've spent time stewing and maybe talking and whatever, but we haven't actually talked to the Lord about it. We haven't said, God, here's the thing I observe. Here's what I think is underneath it. Here's what my concern about what will happen if it doesn't change. How are we continuing to seek the Lord in the midst of our concerns? So those are my words for you today. Take some time to prayerfully consider what's in your circle of influence, what's in your circle of concern, and make sure you bring the right kind of focus and energy towards those two circles, those two lists. So that's your assignment for understanding scope. Take good care. Godspeed.